Okay, so over Easter you should be doing some revision for the exam. The main focus of your revision should be Section A and Section B of the paper. Section C on Fight Club. For some of you, you've just started that part of the paper, but others will be focusing on that after Easter. So the main focus for your revision at this stage should just be Section A and Section B. Now the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you are familiar with the paper, so you know what sorts of questions are going to come up in Section A and Section B, and you have a think about the questions, and that will give you a kind of focus for the revision that you do. So to find past papers, click on General. You'll see the past papers link here, and if you just scroll down you'll see mark schemes first of all, and then these are past papers. Now some are AS papers FM2, so obviously don't look at those, just look at the ones listed FM4. Okay, so if I just look at this one first of all, you'll see the format of the paper, 2 3/4 hours, so slightly longer than the exam last year. There are again 3 sections. You must answer 1 question from each section, and Section A and Section B are worth 35 marks each. Section C is only worth 30 marks because you just focused on 1 film. For Section A, there's quite a lot of different topics on there, so it's important you get the right topic. So we're doing this one, Specialist Study Urban Stories, Power, Poverty and Conflict. So it's either question 5 or question 6. Now what you'll notice for Section A, there tends to be a different emphasis in terms of the questions. So you'll have one question where there's more of a focus on social, historical context and environment. So in this paper that's question 5, looking at the representation of urban environments and how they contribute to key themes of the film. So that's kind of broader, what you call macro question. And then you tend to get another question which is more focused on style and film form. Okay, so this one says stylistic choices made by filmmakers define not just the look but also the meaning of a film. So there might be a broad focus on style or form, or it might focus on the importance of cinematography or editing or mise en scène or sound, but it's what we call a micro-analysis. It's much more focused on film form. Now, I wouldn't prepare for one type of question over the other. Whatever question you do, you're going to be talking about the same kinds of things in terms of, you know, the text itself and context. It's just going to be a slightly different focus. Really, as part of your revision, you should be prepared to talk about both, so the text itself, but also the broader kind of context. Okay, so for Section A, if you go to FM4 folder, Section A, World Cinema, it gives you an overview of what you need to know. So thinking about how foreign language films or world cinema might differ from mainstream Hollywood films. You need to make sure you're completely confident on sort of film form and narratives, the sort of stuff that really we looked at AS. You need to discuss issues of representation in the film, so issues of criminality, look at representation of police, race, religion, class, age and gender as relevant to the film. You need to know the 2 films very well, so I would re-watch La Haine and City of God as part of your revision over Easter, so both films are on here, because it's really important that you can make reference to key scenes in the exam. Okay, you've got a link here to a range of resources that will be useful for Section A by film. So you've got City of God here, La Haine here. These 2 resources give you advice on exam technique, planning and paragraphing. So looking at context, it's important you're familiar with the context surrounding the 2 films. This City of God overview will give you some pointers. You don't need to know loads about Brazil and when the film was set in the 1960s and 70s, but it's important you've got a kind of broad awareness. If you go to slide 7 here, it talks a bit about the favela, social conditions in the favela, a little bit about the sort of history and politics in Brazil. That's not essential, but just a broad understanding of the fact it was a kind of era of turmoil. You had military rule. Those kind of things are going to be useful. Same sort of thing for La Haine. You've got some notes here on the social political context for that film. Again, making sure you're aware of the social problems that existed in France at that time, you know, the division along ethnic grounds, you know, problems of racism and racial division, the problems in the suburbs around Paris where the film is set, looking at issues of unemployment, problems with the police and police corruption, and the deaths of young immigrants in police custody. That's a kind of broad historical context for La Haine. Okay, so you should make sure you go through those slides and just make sure you're confident in discussing those kind of issues in an exam context, making reference to those kind of points. Now, key scenes, you've got the films on eStream. Let's go back. So on eStream, you can link. They are linked into Moodle. If you actually open them up on eStream, it will take you to key scenes that are chaptered. There are notes in there as well to help you. So as well as watching the films again, focus on those key scenes. There are also more detailed notes and resources for both films. So I'll just go back here. You'll see for City of God, you've got some quite detailed notes here on each section of the film. So basically it just kind of goes through the different eras, so the 60s, the 70s up to the present day. So have a read through those, highlight, you know, you can print them off, highlight key sections, just to support your viewing really. They're kind of like viewing notes for the film. And then, let's just go back for La Haine. You've got some extension reading here, okay, which again gives you a similar kind of overview of the film and exploring in more detail, okay. So do just make use of those resources. Now for section B, go back to the main page. Obviously this is going to be more recent for most of you, for all of you really, you've been looking at this quite recently. The key thing for section B, again, your knowledge of film form, camera editing, sound, mise-en-scène is really important, as well as having understanding the importance of narrative and character and themes. There is some specific theory for section B, so you should be familiar with the ideas of Stuart Hall, encoding, decoding model, preferred readings, negotiated readings, oppositional readings, and the importance of that in looking at spectatorship. Then you've got what we call the sort of cognitive theory. If I can actually get that to open, there we go. So the two Smiths, Greg and Murray, talking about the importance of emotional cues, markers, goal-orientated narratives, alignment, allegiance, those kind of things. Just make sure you're confident with that theory. For Stuart Hall, we looked at Pulp Fiction as an example of that theory. For cognitive theory, we looked at The King's Speech, but obviously you're trying to apply them to the two main films we're focusing on, which are Argo and United 93. Again, you might not need to re-watch these films, assuming you have seen them already, which you should have done, because you've watched them quite recently. But if you feel you need to look through some key scenes again, just make sure you're confident that you can bring examples in. What I'd like you to do over Easter is basically do a past paper for section B. Because you've been doing it quite recently, you haven't done a past paper for it yet. I'd like to have a go at doing a past paper in exam conditions over the Easter holidays. So if you find the resource link for section B, click on there, you will see, like with section A, there's some advice on planning your response here. Okay, it uses a question, possible question, and also some advice on paragraphing, like with section A. So before you attempt the paper, look through those documents and have a go at the tasks on there. So there's a task for each on each of those documents, planning and paragraphing. You've got a list of all, or a number of past paper questions here. Have a look through those. You've got an idea of the types of questions that are going to come up. And then the actual paper I want you to have a go at, if you can go back to the general folder and click on past papers. The one I'd like to have a go at is, and make sure you get the right one, summer 2014, so the year before last. Click on that, and if you scroll down to section B, again there are quite a few topics in section B, so make sure you get the right one. We're doing this one, popular film and emotional response. So it's either question 15 or 16. So one of these two questions. Obviously, you can now see what the questions are, which you won't be able to do in the actual exam, but try and actually write the essay and exam conditions. Give yourself 55 minutes to do it, unless you get extra time, in which case use that extra time. If you're allowed to word process in the exam, word process it. If not, it should be handwritten. So make sure you've answered one of these questions in exam conditions for when you come back, the first lesson back after Easter.